Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. It is so great to be here. I am excited about this conversation. There are going to be certainly things that I cover. I will try not to go super fast. I do, however, want to give an opportunity for all of us to have a discussion, for you to ask your questions and get responses before we leave today. So feel free to put your questions, your comment, your thoughts in chat and your questions in the Q&A, and we will do our best to get to them within the hour that we have. Let's go ahead and get started. So let me tell you a little bit about me. One, that I'm not really great at navigating PowerPoint, so you'll know that now, just a heads up. I am Hope Lenore. I am the founder and owner of Rise and Fly here in Texas, though I support teams internationally. What I help with is to get talent in the right places. That means the existing talent in the workforce in the right places, specifically based on aligning their professional and their spiritual purpose. So knowing to me that those are the same things within our career. It also includes diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives, efficiencies, error-free processes, and all of those great things. So that is me. Of course, I have to go next with the traditional way, which is the agenda. So here are some of the things that we are going to talk about today. I've already introduced myself. Of course, I would love to give some descriptions, specifically or particularly around the definitions of mentorship versus coach versus ally versus sponsor, and a quick discussion on the difference between allyship and advocacy. Then we'll go into the history of allyship in the workspace, talk about some program strategies, what that actually looks like. Of course, we need ways to measure. So what does that look like? Sharing some success stories, some takeaways, some tips, and definitely a call to action. Whew, sounds like a lot, but our goal is definitely to get there. Again, I encourage you to put your comments, your questions in the chat or in Q&A as you think about them so you don't forget them at the end. There may be opportunities in between the slides that I have today that we'll be able to discuss this even more before the end of the presentation. Mentor, coach, ally, sponsor. What is the difference? So these are general definitions just to give you an idea. Mentor is relationship-based. This is a person who has great experience or tenure that helps a person with less experience in order to help raise their potential. So the goal here is to help them improve their potential. A coach, similar to a mentor, they help instruct or train to reach a particular goal. So I hope that you hear what I said there about particular or certain goal. They give consistent feedback. And this feedback and this instruction or training is based on a specific goal, unlike mentorship, which may not have a particular goal. Coaching also has particular dates in mind, which mentorship, this may not be the case. Then we move to what we're talking about today, which is ally. An ally is that person or individual who learns, develops empathy, identify ways to use their privilege. They take on the struggle as their own. They go to war, so to speak, with a person, not for a person. So remember, they're taking on the struggle as their own. They are doing this side by side with the person that they hope to build an allyship with, or be an ally for, I should say. They are consistent and they have accountability with marginalized individuals or groups. Their efforts must be recognized, however, by those they are hoping to be an ally for. So be clear on that note is that you can't say, I am an ally for. That person that you hope to be an ally for must recognize you instead as an ally. Again, that's based on your behavior and your consistency. They decenter themselves, and we're still talking about allies. They speak up, they listen, they support, they educate, they're side by side with the person that they're supporting, the person that's in a marginalized group. Let's go ahead and talk about allyship versus advocacy. And this is in the context of diversity, equity, and inclusion. So allyship is supporting while advocacy amplifies the problem and disrupts the systems in place, even if it oppresses somebody else. And though distinct, they are often used interchangeably. Allyship is often characterized by listening, learning, and standing in solidarity with marginalized communities. Again, they take on the struggle as their own. Advocacy can take many forms, and some of these examples include lobbying for policy changes or raising awareness through campaigns or events. Now, let's give an example of an ally, and especially in the C-suite. That's a leader who recognizes someone is taking credit for something that's not theirs. An ally then speaks up and makes sure that that person gets credit. Moving on, and we can talk about this all day, but moving on to sponsorship. Sponsorship, one of my favorite, has to be someone of influence. So the sponsor has an influence who advocates for another by use of their social capital. In this case, they open up career opportunities. They drive to make that happen for people in marginalized groups, just in our example. They, in other words, increase the opportunity for someone else. Now, all of these are important. And just because I went in a form of mentor, coach, ally, sponsor, it doesn't have to go in this order. And you don't have to be one in order to eventually be the other. Again, all are important, but for our focus, it's going to be on allyship, specifically C-suite allyship. So before we go to the next slide, I just want to make sure that we're clear, and I know that all of my peers here that are listening are, but just as a reminder, C-suite is the highest ranking of leaders, right? So that could be the chief executive officer, chief information officer, chief financial officer, chief operational officer, etc. So that's what we're talking about today when we say C-suite. Again, our focus is C-suite allyship. I do definitely want to talk about why it's important, but let's first get into the history of allyship. Allyship, it's always existed in several forms in several spaces. But it wasn't until the early 1900s, believe it or not, that it was formal in the workplace. And I should say a workplace. So what I'm talking about is IBM, who created the Be Equal initiative. And there I have program, but it's actually Be Equal initiative. And this was in the early 1900s, and about 1910 is where they formed this program for their organization, especially for those who had different abilities or disabilities. And then we have 2020, when it became even more formal, or should I say popular, especially during the pandemic and after George Floyd. So on this point, C-suite allyship didn't become a standard or an expectation, or it wasn't vocalized or formal into the early 21st century. Again, around 2020. So this is where we saw, as a result, C-suite executives being expected to actively engage in allyship efforts, whether through advocacy, resource allocation, policy development, or anything else. They understood then that having diverse and inclusive workplaces are not only morally imperative, but also crucial for attracting top talent, fostering innovation, and enhancing financial performance. So that leads us to our benefits. So I'll go to the next slide. Again, allyship is indeed a leadership skill. So know that 45% of people, when asked 45% how included they felt, is based on the behavior of the leader. And that goes into 3 of the benefits, though there are much more that I've listed here: psychological safety, keeping great employees, greater productivity, loyalty, insights, profitability, etc. So when we're thinking about all of these things, we're thinking about there's a greater promoter from employees. So we have promoter scores, and they're called different things for the employees that we have, which may be employee experience score, employer net promoter score, so many things that we call these surveys. But this is an increase when they feel like they have allies, leadership allies in the workplace. Employees feel more empowered to share their ideas. There's greater employee productivity, again, greater insights from employees, increased company profitability. I have to be reminded of that because some of us prefer to hear those things in order to make things happen. 50% of employees are more likely to stay with the company and more likely to improve performance if they feel they have a leader ally in their workspace. Diversity and inclusion work, especially for us, goes from 30% to 90% if allies get involved, especially on a leadership level. So let's soak all of that in. So now what? We know the history. We know the definitions of what we're going for. We know the benefits. So now let's talk about, where do we even start with all of this? Specifically, again, C-suite allyship. More stats for you. 90% of leaders don't feel equipped to be a good leader ally. So that means we need more information. The leader needs more information. Where do we start? Where do I start? External research, of course. Let's take, in addition to that, the surveys, the evaluations that we already have. So most of us do yearly assessments or yearly surveys with our employees. We ask them, hopefully all of us are asking them about the feeling of inclusion, the likelihood that they would recommend another great person that they know to work here at the company. Do they feel like they have an ally? Do they feel like they have the support that they need? So if you've already had those questions a part of your regular surveys, here's an opportunity to take a look specifically for the level of allyship. Understand why from the verbatims or from the choices that associates make on that survey, why the company would need to do or engage an allyship program or have more C-suite allies in the workspace. Now, yes, leaders do most of their own research if they're wanting to be an ally, and self-development to understand their positional power. Now let's talk about focus groups. And focus groups are good because they include employee resource group, or should I say, should include employee resource groups, or what some of us are calling affinity groups. The responses that you get in focus groups are going to be very, very different, or maybe even more detailed than you would see on a multiple choice survey, numerical survey, and even one that allows verbatim choices. So consider a focus group as well. And after going through those things, think about, what is our commitment? I say after, but it also should be before. And it's a draft. What is our commitment to allyship based on what we know now? What is our strategy? And what are our measurable goals? So I encourage all of us, if we haven't started these types of programs yet, to make sure that we're thinking about, how are we measuring the success on what it is that we're doing? For example, what will accountability look like? And one idea when you're thinking about measuring and accountability, maybe someone helps you become accountable in the C-suite space, like the diversity, equity, and inclusion leader, or HR and people leaders, managers. And remember, the commitment is a draft. So while it remains the same, the strategy may look different depending on the business unit or the team. And consider not using the same thing that other companies use, because what you'll find in your surveys, evaluations, and focus groups is that your culture may be very different from another company. Again, the surveys may be misleading. As the audience feel more comfortable responding with the truth, consider externally led focus groups, or a very trusted group in your company. Let's go further into the strategies. Required learning. Remember when I said earlier that leaders don't feel empowered to be an ally? Now, that's not every leader, but most leaders, especially if they haven't designed or been a part of a program like this, they don't. So provide a plan or a toolkit. Make sure that you identify those potential C-suite allies that want to be involved. So if you think about it, for those of us who are project managers, or any other type of planning leader that's heavily involved in planning, you're thinking about your stakeholders. Who are your stakeholders? What level of involvement or desires do they actually have, or interest in this type of program? Those are the ones that can help you build these types of initiatives. Specifically, let me go into the program strategies. Number one, required learning. So start with required learning. Yes, you're going to have and want allies in the C-suite who want to be involved. But there are some that don't feel like they have what they need to be involved, some that don't know what being an ally is, and some that are interested or maybe not interested, but once you put the information in front of them, they are. Or the required training, and as we know, especially for those of us in training, that sometimes it takes us to have or start off with what's required in order to build a norm for our organizations. So required learning, provide that for C-suite potential allies. Then think about an allyship match. And that could mean many things. One could be actually identifying those marginalized groups that have the highest or more pronounced pain points. Or it could be those individuals or groups that resonate with those individuals in the C-suite. So I'll give some examples. There are several C-suite, I call them allies, who do the work based on their experiences with their family, their friends, the community organizations that they are involved in, that they have an affinity for supporting these particular groups. Know their stories and help understand how you can match them with this particular group. Or if this is someone who just says, I want to be an ally for all, that's a great conversation to have and dig deeper into how do we support you and you support others that you hope to be an ally for. And then there's allyship, a part of other programs. When I mention other programs, the first thing that comes to mind are the employee resource groups or the affinity groups that the organization has. Remember, there's required learning, which includes self-reflection and how-tos, and that doesn't stop just one time or 4 times that they take the training. They're constantly learning. There's the potential for matching. There's the potential to be a part of other programs that they choose to be an ally for. And again, think about those most severe pain points, whether those individuals, groups, or programs, or marginalized groups with whom they are moved mostly to be an ally. And I don't want to leave the benefits behind where I talked about measure the options or measurement options. Have marginalized groups define later when they come back how behaviors have changed. What did they notice after these initial programs have begun? Is the C-suite consistently going to best practice meetings? So some organizations do that well, where the C-suite members actually meet among themselves to talk about their experiences, their best practices, what they've learned externally that they think would be great to bring to this particular company that they work for. Are they being consistent with these meetings that they're having with each other? How successful are trainees after training? And that can be measured via survey or some type of assessment. Go back to the associate focus groups or company surveys. Of course, that means that you have to be clear in training what allyship means. What does it look like when it comes from the C-suite? And there's another one that I find really interesting. Has there been an increase in the number of applicants? Has there been an increase in the number of people that are able to get an interview for these types of roles? Accountability. Think about, is this part of the yearly review process? So yes, you can measure, but what does that measurement mean? And how can people be held accountable? Could be a part of the yearly review process. Yes, with the C-suite. A part of employee engagement program sponsorship. Those are things to think about. What I forgot to mention, so let me go back to some examples. Because I'm sure there are several of us that are wondering, will this work? If we put any of these things into place, will it work? Has it worked for anyone else before? And I want to share some of those things that I captured when doing my research about allyship, which I have been a part of a C-suite allyship program probably for 4 years with several businesses. So one example is the Sony Music Group. In 2022, that's when they started their Allyship at Work pilot, and that included 4-hour training and small group follow-up sessions. And then there's Microsoft online classes, and this is self-paced. So these are online classes about allyship, or they can go to facilitated sessions. And these facilitated sessions um, include all kinds of ways and learning methods, which are very helpful for their employees. By the way, 81%, the last survey I found, 81% of employees at Microsoft say the company is diverse and inclusive. Then I talked about IBM with the Be Equal initiative, and that includes unconscious bias education with a focus on performance. And then there are other businesses like the Sam's Club, Samsung, Amazon, Procter and Gamble. Particularly for Procter and Gamble, we see equal, and that's one of their programs specifically for gender equality. All right. So we've talked about several things, strategies, ideas. Remember, showing up is one of the most powerful things we can do. There are going to be lots of C-suite leaders who hope to be allies that are afraid of what to say, what to do, who don't feel empowered, who may not be sure of what the next step is. There may be those of us who are in the diversity, equity, and inclusion space as leaders that are also talking to each other about what do we do? How can we show up? And the main thing is just showing up. That's the most powerful thing that we can do. And actually, Naomi Evans says that in being an ally. Let's try. Because remember, things are always changing about how to be a better ally from the words we use, the behaviors that we have. So it's consistent learning and interest in being an ally to support others side by side with them. So here's some key takeaways. Allyship is needed. These are very simple. You know these. Yes, mistakes will be made. Yes, we will continue to learn and know that everyone and our business will definitely benefit. So here's our call to action. Self-reflect and make connections. So for those of us who are listening, especially if we're in the diversity and inclusion space, we're taking it upon ourselves to reflect on how am I being a potential ally, and how could I be the best ally for marginalized groups? How can I make connections with others so that I too can learn about their challenges and their best practices? Maybe they can help give guidance on how I can develop programs for our sweet allyship. Better yet, maybe they can help give great ideas on how I can approach the C-suite about being allies in our workspace. I challenge each of you to learn more, explore current C-suite allyship programs, and just try it. And let those know that we are trying it and we are being honest about what it is that we're trying to achieve, and that we are in the learning, always in the learning phase. Thank you all very much. Again, this is my name. Here's a QR code. After meeting today, if you ever want to reach out to me to learn more, I'll be happy to share my experiences in talking to you about allyship in the C-suite and what I've learned and some tactics that I've used that I found very successful in shifting the culture in various business groups. Amber,